So, welcome back. We are going to be analyzing another hand. We are going to be analyzing a big blind versus a cutoff open, where the big blind just calls. We've already, in our last video, analyzed what the cutoff is going to be betting with. And now we're going to be looking at what the big blind is going to look to call with, as well as looking at the branches of how they raise and how they balance their raising range between bluffs as well as value. And so, before we go into it, I think we can review just a little bit kind of how we played the cutoffs betting ranges, just to kind of look. So here's the opening range we have for the cutoff. We're opening 21% of hands, which is it's on the tight side. And this is what we had for the open, where we have, for the most part, broadways and some suited connectors and some suited gappers. Not messing about too much with offsuit hands. I think Queen Jack off is the weakest offsuit hand that's getting played here. And then the big blind is only playing 18% of hands total, or 19%-ish. These percentages aren't super exact because we have some situations where we're playing some of the hands. And we'll talk more about the big blind pre-flop raise or ranges in a little bit. But we were betting 59% of the time on the flop. The flop came 3 of clubs, ace of hearts, 4 of hearts. This is a flop that favors the cutoff's opening range, and it's also a flop that you're not going to really want to check raise on, I think, too often as the big blind. And because the big blind's not going to want to check raise too often, I think what the strategy should be is to actually bet a lot more than 59% of the time and to bet smaller instead. But we had, for the most part, for these first few analyses, what we're looking to do is just 75% pot size bet. We're just going to analyze what it looks like when that's always the bet size. And if you're betting 75%, I think 59% is a good frequency. And what we were betting with was some of our really strong value hands, with the sets with the 3s and the 4s, and we were actually checking back our sets of aces because these block a lot of the continuing range of the big blind. And then a lot of aces betting with, not all of them, betting with some of our draws that have lower showdown value, so like the weak flush draws and the weak backdoor flush draws, and checking some of our flush draws that have stronger showdown values, so more of our ace-king type hands. The turn came a 7 of clubs, making it a double flush draw board, and on these types of boards, if you have the draws and if you have a lot of high equity draws as well as really good value hands, I actually like overbetting, and so we overbet and we bet slightly more, a higher amount of value hands. And then let's see what came. And then the backdoor flush came in on the river, and we were betting a lot. It was kind of hard to find some bluffs, and I think that we might be a little thin on the value betting stuff like, let's see. We were trying to figure out what ace kings we should bet, and what we were kind of thinking is that maybe we should be betting a lot of our aces for value, our ace king and our ace queen for value, specifically when we have the ace of clubs, because then they can't have the ace of clubs. And so we think that a lot of what their good check raising range as a bluff will look like is just having the ace of clubs, where they called 2 streets with top pair, and now facing a third bet, they think their top pair is probably no good, so they turn their hand into a bluff. If we have the ace of clubs, then we block a lot of their good bluffs, so we can kind of try and go for thin value and try and get value from an ace that's calling down. But this might be just too thin to be betting for value with ace king and ace queen. I'm not sure. We're going to kind of get into that a little bit when we take a look at the big blind range. Okay, so let's look at our big blind calling range first. We are calling 10s through deuces. I like to actually raise occasionally, maybe 1/6 the time. 1/6 is also easy because you can determine before a session if you're going to do you can randomize and be like, okay, for this session, for my small pocket pairs, I'm going to raise when I have a club and a heart, or I'm going to raise when I have a spade and a diamond, so it's pretty easy to randomize. And then your 3 lowest combinations of pocket pairs, so in this case it's deuces, 3s, and 4s, you're raising 1/6 of the time as a bluff pre-flop. This way you get better board coverage on, like, the lower boards, which can be hard to connect on when you are raising, when you are 3-betting, because the only thing you'll have is really, you will have these overpairs, but you won't have any sets, and so you will sometimes not have really nutted ranges, and so this puts some nutted hands in your range, and also gives you interesting bluff opportunities with, like, straight draws. And so maybe I don't like it as much with the deuces as I do once you start getting into, like, the 4s through 6s range for the bluff, because you're more likely to get some sort of straight draw bluff opportunity. But okay, we're just calling with the 10s through deuces because one of our assumptions is we're trying to play GTO, so we're not trying to do an exploitative strategy, and we're not playing any mixed strategies because mixed strategies get complicated. We are calling ace-queen off through ace-jack off, king-queen off, I think that's the weakest offsuit, and then suited broadways for the most part, some suited 1-gappers down to jack-9, and then 9/8 suited, so this range is pretty snug. We are playing some of the weaker suited connectors and gappers, but we are playing them as raises, if we take a look up here. And so, ideally what you would be doing is be doing a mixed strategy where you are raising a small amount of the time with your stronger, like, connectors and gappers, and calling a smaller amount of time with your weaker ones, so that you have better board coverage. But this is just, we want to play a simplified where we're not splitting, like, fractions of hands. And so, okay, the flop comes 3 of clubs, ace of hearts, 4 of hearts, and this removes, I think this was 15 combinations from our hand, so we have 123 combinations remaining, and we are going to first ask ourselves, who does this flop favor? We talked about it earlier. It favors the pre-flop aggressor, so we are going to check. We do not want to have a leading range on this type of flop. Almost always you just want to check to the pre-flop aggressor, but it's important to sometimes ask yourselves, should I have a leading range here? This can make it so that you can become a very difficult player to play against when you are capable of playing out of flow, where you are going to be betting into the person who has the betting lead. Let's say. And now we want to talk about bet sizing, because we are assuming that they're going to bet 75% of pot size bet, because that's just how we are doing the first few of these, just for the sake of simplicity. But I think it's important to talk about why I think that you should be betting a lot smaller on this flop. The larger you bet, okay, first of all, let's talk about position. When you are in position, it is better when you're in position and you bet, as the pre-flop aggressor is here, because we're the big blind and we're checking to the cutoff. When you bet, you reopen the betting, and so betting has a real cost. When you're out of position and you bet, you don't reopen the betting. And so let's say you're in the under the gun and the button calls. What you can betting is basically betting 1 chip is effectively the same as checking. It doesn't psychologically feel the same as checking, but it's basically checking. And a good heuristic, if someone's just like min betting into you, is to just treat it as if they checked. If they are min betting into you, you have to continue with almost your entire range. You can fold the very worst hands, but in order to avoid being exploitable by this sort of strategy, you have to do this. If someone is min betting to you out of position, though, it's dangerous for them because they give you an opportunity to raise. Okay, that's the first thing regarding bet sizing. So in general, the point of that is if you're out of position, betting really small doesn't really have a huge cost because it doesn't reopen the betting. So you can bet like 20%, and it's not a big deal. When you're out of position, when you're in position and you bet 20%, you also reopen the betting. And so there's a bit of a dynamic where small bets out of position, like really small bets, are a tool that you can have in your arsenal that you maybe don't want to do as much in position, but you can also do that. Also, when you are out of position, sometimes you want to bet and raise larger, because once you are getting stacks in or threatening to get stacks in, you destroy the advantage of being in position. So pre-flop, if you're going to be out of position pre-flop, I like to generally raise bigger, and if you're going to be in position when you're 3-betting, raising smaller. Okay, so we kind of bet for 3 reasons. We bet for value, to get them to put more money in with a worse hand. We bet as a bluff to get them to fold a better hand. And then we bet for protection. And this is kind of what we're going to talk about here with the bet sizing. And protection is kind of a combination of both value and bluff. We are trying to bet with a better hand and also get them to fold hands that have equity against us, high equity. And so, when you're betting for protection, generally you're kind of looking for a few things. On the flop, what's usually important is, are there overcards? Are there straight opportunities? And are there flush opportunities? And if we take a look at this ace-3-4 board, we will see that there are no overs to the ace, there are flush opportunities, and there are straight opportunities. And so what this means is we kind of have 2 out of 3 of the things you kind of want to protect against. But when we have top pair, an overcard will never come when we have top pair with an ace. And so, generally speaking, when there's an ace, you can kind of bet smaller because you don't have to protect your top pairs in terms of your range. And then then we take a look at the flushes and the straights, and there aren't too many straight draws. All the straight draws are cards that contain a 3 or a 5, or like a 6 and a 7 for like backdoor straights. But there aren't too many straight draws on here as well, and so you're not as worried about folding those or getting those to put money in bad. And then this is kind of like normal in terms of like flush opportunities. Notably, the ace of hearts is already on the board, and so you cannot have top pair with the flush draw. But okay, when you bet large, also there's a few things to consider. When you bet really big, this polarizes your range. You're either going to have a really, really strong hand, or you're going to have a bluff, right? And when you bet small, this condenses your range. You're more likely to have a medium strength hand, so, well, let's take a look at like what this guy's opening range from the cutoff is, and you'll see there's a ton of aces in here. And so his range is going to consist mostly of a ton of aces, right? And he's going to have sets. He's going to have all the sets on this board. He's going to have aces, 3s, and 4s. But there aren't very many 2 pairs. There's ace-4 suited, and I think that's it. And so when you bet on this board, you can actually just bet really small, or on the smaller side, maybe closer to like a 3rd pot. It's kind of a number I like better. You bet almost your entire range, and this is going to keep your range more condensed and not polarized, so when it comes on the turn, after the big blind calls, it will be harder for them to know where they're at when you bet small with just an enormous portion of your range. And it's also, this is more of an exploitative thing, a lot of people don't continue on ace-high boards as often as they should, from a mathematics perspective, and we might see that a little when we get into looking at what our ranges should call. Okay, but for here, we're going to assume it's a 75% pot size bet, so that means we actually get to get away from 40% of our hands in terms of the math. I don't have the math here. Matthew Janda does it in his book, applications of no limit hold'em, and that's where I'm getting this 60% from. But we're going to have to defend 74 combinations, and we are going to defend by either raising or by calling. And on this flop, let's see. So we're going to have raise. Ugh. We don't want that highlight. So we're going to have raise, bluff, or call for our continuing range. And so now we have to ask ourselves, do we want to raise on this type of board very often? And I think the answer is no, because we do not have the absolute nuts. He has a really big range advantage. And so when we raise, the question is like, okay, well, what's our raising range look like? And if our raising range is going to consist of, especially if he's betting 75%, but is our raising range going to be top pair hands? If it's top pair hands, he'll have us outkicked actually quite a lot more, because we have ace queen and ace jack, and maybe we're even raising the ace queen pre. I wouldn't hate that. And when we take a look, he's going to have ace king. He's going to be down to ace 10 as well, so he'll have some more of the weaker ones, but we'll be dominated a lot. And so if we raise with our ace queens and he just flats with ace king, we're going to be in like weird spots that aren't so good for us. Let's see. We're raising our ace kings, we're raising our ace queen suiteds, so we're not going to have those. And so, okay, well, what else can we raise with? We can raise with our flush draws, but we're going to have too many flush draws if we don't have value hands. We need to have, roughly speaking, for when it's on the flop, we kind of want to have 2 value hands for every bluff, or sorry, 2 bluffs for every value hand, and be kind of even on the turn, and then on the river we want to be weighted more towards value with 2 value hands to 1 every what is it, bluff. And so what are you raising here? And it looks like it's just the sets. And so what you would have to do is, you can't raise all the sets. Because if you raise all the sets, and this is your strategy, it's pretty easy to exploit you by just overbetting the turn once you just call, because your range is going to be capped. It can no longer have really strong hands in it. And so, I think I like defending entirely by calling on the flop, but it puts us in a weird spot where once we get to the turn, when we play in flow, when we just check to him again, he can check back and realize the equity of whatever he wants, even when we have really strong holdings. And so I think what the strategy should be is to check and maybe look to lead some turns. And this is how I would actually play it if he bets small on the flop. Generally, when someone bets really small is kind of on a flop is kind of a situation when I want to sometimes have leads on turns where you will now know which of your hands make the better bluffs in terms of how you want to continue, because you've gotten to see an additional card. And so maybe you just play check call and then lead turn instead of having a check raising range, especially when they have a range advantage here. Okay, so I think we don't want to raise. If we did want to raise, I think we would want to raise with our sets that do not have, we would want to raise with our 3s that don't have a heart in them, and we would want to raise with our 4s that don't have a spade in them, and that's how we would split the ranges. And so we would be raising, what is it, like we would be, so we would be raising 2 combinations, and then we would have to find 1 bluff hand, and so, or sorry, we would have to find 4 bluff hands, and maybe the bluff hands would be like 5-6 suited, except we can't have 5-6 suited, so like it'd be like 8-9 suited. Yeah, I don't like this. So we're gonna defend entirely by calling, and so the most obvious calls are we are going to be calling with our 4s and our 3s. So, which we have 3 combinations of. For each, which puts us at 6 hands. We are also going to continue with all of our ace queen off and all of our ace jack off. And actually, since we are raising ace queen suited, we have 124 combos. So we'll just call this 74. It's not quite 74. But for the sake of simplicity, we can call it 74. So ace queen off we will call with. We will have, let's see, how many combinations? There's 16 to start with. We don't have any of the suited, so that's 12. Minus another 3 because we don't have any of the ones with the heart, so there's 9 combinations. And ace jack off, there will be 10 combination. Wait. Hold the phone. Pump the brakes. Oh, we have all combinations of ace jack. And there will be 10 combos. Because we will have... No, there's more than 10. There will be 12 combos. So, all of our combos that don't have... So, plus 21 here is going to be 27. And we're close to halfway there. I imagine we want to continue with all of our ace 10s, but let's, yeah, we'll just put ace 10 suited in here, of which there's 3 combinations. And so, if we take a look at what our value looks like here, or like, this is, we're going to have mainly just calling with aces. You can maybe raise the 3s. Like, if you're looking to make an exploitative range, maybe you raise the 3s and you are just like, or the 3s and the 4s, and you're less worried about getting pelted on the turn. But if you play this strategy and your opponents know you play this type of strategy, they can exploit you by overbetting turns after you don't raise the flop. And it's going to put you in a really, like, ugly spot where, like, they are going to... like, with ace-king, just, like, beat you into the absolute ground for value. And you're going to have no protection against this type of overbet. Your range is capped. But if they bet ace-king and you have 3s and 4s, they're gonna eat it sometimes. Okay. So, we have 30 combos, and now we are going to want to continue with a lot of hands that have high equity, but maybe not showdown value. We could continue with 10s and 9s and 8s and, like, look at it like that. But if they have an ace, we're way behind, and one of the problems is we're not really going to catch up with the 10s through 8s, right? And so we might play some combinations, some amount of these, but just thinking it through, we're not catching up if they're ahead, basically, because we need to hit another 10. And so these hands like play worse than something like King Queen, where we might be ahead of whatever they're betting if they're bluffing, right? And when we improve, we can improve to 2 pair, we can get straight draws, we can make flushes. It's not just 2 outs when we're behind. And so that's one of the reasons why defending like these pocket pairs can be like so bad, but we might defend pocket pairs that have flush draws or backdoor flush draws. We'll probably defend a lot of pocket pairs that have both a club and a heart in them. And that's probably how we'll make that selection. But let's take a look at our kings. So we get down to 8-9, and or looking at our suited connectors, we get down to 9-8 suited, and this is, if we look at like our raising range, actually has a lot of like types of hands we would want to continue with, like these 6-5s and these 5-4s, like these types of low hands, and now we don't have them in our range here, which is why it's important to have mixed strategies where you're sometimes going to be calling with these hands, just mostly raising with your weaker ones. We can just look to fold our weakest suited connectors, but let's say we are defending. We're going to defend all of our. Oop. Wow, we put that in the wrong spot. We're going to defend our strong kings here. And then our broadways that can, so is this Queen Jack through Jack 10? We're actually just going to defend Queen Jack of hearts and clubs through 9-8 of hearts and clubs. So that's 4 different types of combos and 2 of each, so that's 8. We're probably going to be calling with so sometimes we want to raise king queen suited, and sometimes we want to call it. We're playing as if we just called it. Oh, we also have king 10. So we only need to find 30 more combos to defend. And I think now we can take a look at our pocket pairs and just say, if we have a heart, we'll just defend. Let's see. How many combinations have either a heart or a club in them? I think it's 5, right? Yeah, it'll be 5. And so we'll defend. We'll actually select those last, but when we're defending them, we're going to be defending, like, all. Let's see. We'll do king queen when we have the king of hearts, and king queen when we have the king of clubs. And this will add 6 more combos because we're excluding the suited ones because we already have them. Yeah, so this is just going through this now. It's kind of showing why there's like such a nice range advantage for the pre-flop aggressor, because even though we're folding so much, we don't have anywhere near as many aces as them, or like as high a proportion of aces, because we raise a lot of our better aces and we don't call like a ton of aces because we want to avoid being dominated. And so it's a little bit tough here. Let's see. We are going to have to defend more. I mean, we could defend 10s, 9s, 8s, 7s as well. Because we're already defending. I think I like defending the gappers more because we will have, let's see, Queen 10 through Jack 9. And earlier we talked about having a lot of protection against, one of the reasons for betting is having protection against flushes. We'll notice so far we're calling like a ton of either flush draws or backdoor flush draws, and so this is really going to be helping us in that regard. I think we're continuing with now all of our flush opportunities. And so this is kind of how we want to select, especially because we can't call with overs to the board because there's an ace on the board, and when they're when we make pairs later, it's generally not going to be good enough, and so what matters more is the flush equity here. Like, I think it's better than calling like all the king queens or something like this. Although we might call all the king queens now, we can also just decide we are going to call a lot of pocket pairs. Well, let's call with all of our fives. And all of our deuces. And the reason we're doing this is because we also have in addition, we could just be in a spot where we're in really bad shape, but we're also going to have 4 additional outs. We will have the outs, the straight outs, and the hitting a set outs against these ace type boards. Actually, this might be too many combos. We're just going to fold when we have no harder club. And now we just need to continue with 10 more. I think I like... So one of the things to keep in mind is that they are going to be... 10s can be ahead of like their 9s and their 8s and these types of things. So I think we do actually want to continue with like all of our 10s if we can, or 5 of our 10s. It's maybe the way to go. So we'll put that in. And we'll do 6s when we have a heart, I guess. Because having a heart's more important than having a club. And then now we have 2 more combinations. So we can do 7s and 8s with the heart/club. We're actually going to defend 75 combos. So we're going to do 9 of hearts, 9 of clubs, through 7 of hearts, 7 of clubs. And so we're defending a little bit more, which is not a problem. We just have to be kind of over this number to avoid being exploited and folding too much. And we are defending by just calling, so we have no fold equity, so defending a little bit wider doesn't feel too bad. And maybe we should defend a few more combinations of 9s through 7s, but I think this is okay. And so we have a range that is going to be weighted mainly towards aces and suited and backdoor flush opportunities, more so than necessarily going after having high cards, because our high cards are not going to... our king-queen type hands, when they improve, they're really not going to improve that much, so we're only calling king-queen when we have the second nut flush blocker or backdoor flush opportunity for the hearts. Okay, so the turn... forget what the turn came... is the 7 of clubs. So let's take a look here and put on the 7 of clubs onto the board. Okay, and then I will eliminate all these combinations that we can no longer get, and then I will be right back. Okay, and we are back. Notably, we called with one pair of 7s, but that pair of 7s was foiled, so we didn't get the set. On the previous street, it would have been reasonable to call with all of our 7s that had a heart in it. I think this is fine because when a card comes like a 6, then we have a hand that is maybe going to be a good bluff/call because we have the extra straight outs now. Because let's see, if 7, 4, 6, and then you have the 7s. Yeah, if a 5 comes, then you'll have a straight, and you'll also, if a different card comes, you can sometimes just block the straights really hard because you have 2, and so this is something to keep in mind with your like little pocket pairs when it's kind of hard to find like hands to call or bluff with, because we were like, when we're defending against a large bet when we can fold a lot, when we were talking about on the flop, we were having a hard time coming up with combinations. And what the combinations were just basically flush opportunities and aces, and that's kind of it. And our very strongest, just high card hands, which are the king queens, when we specifically have the backdoor flush opportunity or the backdoor blocker. And now that the 7 of clubs has come, this board is a bit tough, because if we take a look, it's double suited. If we look at what we did on as the cutoff, we actually overbet this flop because we had so many good bluffs and we had so much value hands that was ahead of our opponent's calling range that we felt that we could do it. Like if we look at this betting range has got straights, because 6-5 is made a straight. It's got sets. It's got 2 pair. It's got ace king, ace queen, and ace jack. And so 1/4 of this range, our calling range, can only be 1/4 of this range, of this betting range. Our 3s and our 4s now lose to the straight and lose to some of the sets and win against some of the sets, and then we have some combos of ace queen that would beat ace jack, but not all of our ace queen combos because we're raising ace queen suited pre-flop in terms of our strategy. And so it's just really it's really tough. And then these are also way more combinations than the cutoff had for bluffs. So roughly you want to be even, and they had 46 value bets and 34 bluffs, and so this is a spot where you want to overbet when you have too many value hands and not enough bluff hands. And one of the reasons you want to bet like a lot of your value hands is because now there's 2 flush opportunities, so you don't want to just kind of check your ace jack. Is kind of why you want to be betting your ace jack for value, although it sucks when they have ace queen, which we can have. There's only so much you can do. You can either protect your hand, or you can, you can't do both. And so now this is going to be tough again, and the question is should we have a raising range? And if so, what will it look like? And should we have a bluffing range? Right now our range is pretty condensed, and I don't know if we should have a raising range here in the big blind. I mean, I kind of want to have a raising range, but it hurts a lot that we cannot have any of the straights now. So we just can't have the nuts at all. And if we have a bluff, our 5s and our 6s actually make really good bluff candidates, our pair of pocket 5s and pocket 6s. And so those make good bluff candidates. But what would we be raising for value? If we do this sort of thing, but at the same time, we want to protect our sets, right? It's just tough because we can't have the nuts, and so sometimes we're just going to be in like really bad shape. I think we should be raising, but it doesn't feel too good because we are going to leave our we're going to be pretty unprotected on the river, I think. But I like bluff raising the pocket fives and the pocket sixes. Um, this is tough. Could just play the entire range as a call again. And one of the problems is once we get to the river, if we're raising once we get to the river, and our calling range is only, well, hmm, 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 hmm. This is tough. I'm going to have a little bit of a think and then come back. So I decided that raising the sets was probably best, and we will just be capped on the river. But if a flush comes in, we will be uncapped on the river because we're going to be calling with some flush draws. And so the question is, what combinations do we want to raise? I selected 5 and 6, where we have both the heart and the club as raises because they both block the straight, which is the nuts at the current moment. And then I selected as they'll also be able to bluff when, if a flush comes in, you can bluff either one. I think if the flush misses, they make, well, you're probably bluffing the 5-6, the 5s and the 6s, no matter what, on the river. And then you'll be value betting if the flush draws come in, and you'll be value betting the sets if they don't. It's kind of how you'll play the river after this, but I'm having trouble selecting which other flush draw we want to be raising with. And I think maybe we want to be raising with the weakest one we're going to continue with. And so I think what we'll do is we will actually finish out the rest of our range, knowing that we're going to have 6 and 6. And so we need to find, what is this? We're going to need to find another 33 combos here to call with. And if we just look at our aces, let's see. How many combos of aces do we have? We have the ace queen, the ace jack, and the ace 10. That's kind of it. That's 21, 24 combos. That seems fine. I mean, maybe we can fold the ace 10s that don't have a flush draw. And the thing, well, we're definitely calling them all over ace 9s. And maybe we won't want to call it all of our ace jack, but we're just going to put it in here for now. And then just two combo, or just one combo with ace 10. And then we can add more. And this adds up to 22. So we need to find, let's see, was that 34? 11 more hands? And we got the king, queen of hearts, jacks, through the king, jack of hearts and jacks. The reason why we raised with the king 10 is because that way we would have the king high flush, but it's our weakest king. We like calling a little bit more because if they are just betting with their broadways, we actually will be ahead of that in terms of just showdown value. And so we can be ahead of like when we have king queen of clubs, we can be head of king jack of hearts, but we're not ahead of king 10 of, or but we would not be ahead if we had king 10 of clubs. And so that's why we're raising it, because we're trying to fold out some of their draws that we are just not quite beating. And that's why we're raising the weaker ones instead of the stronger ones here. Often I like to raise with my weakest ace flush draw, and sometimes some amount of my strongest, and that way they're kind of a lot easier to play on later streets than the middling ones, because you just kind of know you're not good with the lower ones, and you know you're good with the higher ones, this type of thing. When like the ace comes. Okay, let's see. So that adds 4 more combos, and we need to get up to 33. Well, let's add Queen Jack of Hearts clubs, Queen 10 of Hearts clubs. So now we have a bit of a decision. We could put the 10s back in our range, or we could look to do more flush draws, the ace 10s. We can put those back in our range. And I think this is maybe a thing where you will put the ace 10s back in your range if you think this is going to be like opponent dependent, where if you think your opponent is going for value with like a weaker ace, or that their pre-flop ranges are wider, that you will continue with the ace 10 thinking that you'll be ahead of their aces if you think that they are opening tight, like really tight, because this range that we have here for the cutoff open is really tight, and it doesn't have an ace 9 in it. But people will open ace 9. And so if you think you can dominate some aces, I think you should call with the ace. And I think if you think you can't dominate them, you should call with the draws, right? Because it's which has higher equity against their range. If their range doesn't include any, like, dominated aces, it's going to be, yeah. But we're calling with our draws that might just be ahead of their draws here, with the queen high and the king high. And now we're in a little bit of a rough spot. I think we could maybe look to add 10s when we have the 10 of clubs and the... 10s with the 10 of clubs and 10 of hearts. I kind of don't hate. I kind of hate it, though. Like, it's ahead of their bluff range, but it also blocks their bluff range. But it'll make a nice bluff later. It's also a little bit tempting to call with the king queen of clubs and the king queen of hearts, because those will make very good bluffs on later streets, and they might be ahead of... they'll be ahead of all of their bluffing range, right? But they don't have as much equity overall as, like, I think that... Well, what's our next strongest? Jack 10 then? And so now we kind of have to make a decision. Well, we can raise with Jack 9 of hearts clubs, if we wanted. I think I like just continuing with the flush draws and not messing around with the king queens. This is tough. Finding like which which hands that are no good are better to call with, because they're like, it's the no good is better or the no good is worse. Yeah. It's like such a weird spot. I'm assuming you just like call what the flush is. Okay, so we're gonna Jack 10 and then 10-9 of hearts, clubs. Or sorry, Jack 9. Oh, I guess 10-9 as well. So we'll be defending slightly more than the number. Oh, wait. Except practically speaking, I don't think we ever fold like a flush draw here. Or I guess maybe we do. We just fold the like the very weakest ones. I think we're too heavy to flush draws. So when both flushes miss, we just got too much of this junk. And we don't have good hands to bluff with. Yeah, we're gonna switch this up a little bit. Okay. Because these hands make really good, will make the better bluffs later on if one of the draws come in, and if both of the draws miss, I think I kind of, I don't know if both the draws miss what we do. These probably won't be. Yeah, I mean, ideally we would want some amount of hands that just don't have any club or heart in them, because those will make the best buffs later, but those are also lower equity hands, so we just kind of don't want to include them in our range. Maybe this is wrong. Maybe this should be the 10-9 hearts of clubs, and these two should be the Jack 9 of hearts of clubs, but it's one of the two is like the way to do it. We're just going to do this for a little bit more variety and board coverage, and if they're bluffing with a king or a queen that's like suited or like something like this, and like a king or a queen comes, these hands will make nice checks as well. Not super thrilled about it, but okay. We have we have 46 hands, so we're defending a little bit more than we want. So 46 in total. And then the river, I think I can't remember what it was, the 6 of clubs. So if we take a look at our raising range, what happens is we make a straight, we have these sets, and then we also make 2 flushes with the king 10 and the jack 9. And so, as well as... No, because this hand doesn't exist anymore. But okay, we still have 46 combinations. And we are still assuming that they bet 75% pot, so we need to defend. In order to avoid them just being able to bet with anything, we need to defend 60%, so 0.6 times 46 equals 27.6. Okay. And I think it's going to be... Well, we will be defending all of our flushes. Now we are going to have, like, much bigger raising range, I think. I like just checking to them. And first of all, what are we raising for value? Well, ace 10 of clubs. Oop, let's fix the board. Sorry, guys. Okay, so the nuts is just the nut flush. Is that the absolute nuts? No, I guess 5-4 suited is the absolute nuts. But okay, the nuts, the nut flush. Because neither of these people have 5-4 suited in their opening range. So ace 10 of clubs, ace jack of clubs, and we do not have ace queen of clubs because we are raising that pre-flop. We have king queen of clubs, king jack of clubs. So we know we're raising all of these at least. And the question is how deep do we want to raise our flushes for value? I guess I like the queens. And maybe calling with the jack 10 of clubs. And then we need to find 3 bluffs then. And our best bluffs are going to have the ace of clubs. But I think we prefer just calling. Right? Well, I know one of the hands were, or I know 2 of the hands were bluffing, I guess. The king queens with the clubs are going to make the good bluffs. Let's see, so we have 7 combos so far. So we're going to need 21 more combos. And if we defend all of our aces, that is 21 combos. So we can defend a little bit more than 21, and we can check raise when we have the ace of clubs. So looking back now, I think that this king queen business was a mistake because we have enough combos to defend with just our aces, and we're check raising the aces that block the nut flush. So let's see. If we do the ace of clubs, jack, off, that's 3 combos. And if we do the ace queen, ace clubs, queen off, that's 6 combos. So that's exactly the amount we wanted. And I guess just call down with the rest of the aces. And these these bluffs seem like a little strong as a bluff, except for unless we wanted to over defend this river, they are quite sensible. Even though we're going to be calling with some of our ace jack hands, we'd rather have the blocker on our raises that have the lower equity raises, because when he's betting you have to ask yourself, is he betting with ace queen? If the answer is yes, then you can justify raising some ace jack that doesn't have the ace of clubs. But what did we do here? I think we bet. Yeah, we bet, but not with ace queen. Except when we had the club blocker. So we might have bet with ace jack, but only when the ace of clubs. Okay. So we're kind of ambiguous, like what exactly we thought we should do. So it's, let's see. So there's 6 more combos of this, and then 9 more combos of ace jack off. For a total of 16 combos here, which is 28, which is exactly what we wanted to defend. So if we could go back, we have enough aces. Oop, is the camera frozen? No. So right now, if you can hear us, our OBS says it's not responding. So I don't know what to do here. Okay, it looks like our OBS is back and just kind of had a bit of a snag. I'm not sure exactly when it cut out because we looked up, but we have enough aces to not need King of Hearts, King, Queen to have good bluff slayers when a flush comes in. So we should have called with our flushes. I think. But looking at this, we are defending 28 combos. We are raising our strongest flushes. We are bluff raising when we have the ace of clubs. And then we are calling our weakest flush and the aces. So our range has just been reduced to just calling down aces. He's going to have, if we take a look at where we got on the river with this guy, he was going to have a lot of aces. Or wait, let's see. Like, we're losing to, like, a lot of these aces, not the ace-jack. So maybe ace-jack should not be in the betting range. Or no, wait, this is a flush. But we're looking at it's like we have this merged bet with ace king and ace, like, so we're losing to all of the value range basically. When we just call, they have all these strong. Let's see, we also bet with the straights and the sets. And so we are going to be raising over the straights and the sets. And so they'll just fold the straights and the sets. They'll continue with the flushes. And so it's really nice that we block the flushes because with these hands because they can't have the flush anymore. And so they can only have the weaker flushes, which they might even fold to a check raise, or the straights and the sets, which they ought to fold when raised. And so, yeah, I really like raising these instead of raising like the weakest jack or the weaker ace jacks. We'll sometimes be in bad shape when we call with the ace jacks, but I think our calling range is actually just like, we're comparing our calling range to their betting range. It's just a bluff catcher. It doesn't beat any of their range here. As we played it earlier, it doesn't even beat the merged range where you're like semi-bluffing because we were only merged betting when we had the ace of clubs. But yeah, it's ahead of all the bluffs. The bluffs line up. Let's see. So we have our calling range is this, And maybe the Jack 10 of clubs should even be a raise. I just don't like it as a rejam. I think that I also think that it it blocks Ace of Jack of clubs and Ace 10 of clubs. The question is are they betting those hands? And I think Ace 10 of clubs is maybe a check back on the flop. So the blocker's only like half. Yeah, I don't know. Some people just play their like nut flush draws really aggressively though. Just bet them all, like bet all of them. Um, but yeah, this is what we come up with. Generally speaking, when you are just calling, your call range at the very end is just only ever going to beat a bluff, and then you're like, which is like kind of just how it works, but it beats all the bluffs, right? We're not losing to any of the bluffs down here. Yeah, none of them are even pairs, so the deuce is bluff. None of these bluffs even block our call. Oh no, wait. So some of these bluffs block our calling range, right? And so this is just kind of interesting to think about when we're thinking about bluffs. They like these king queen hands and king jack and jack 10, jack 9. These all block our calling range because we're calling with ace queen and ace jack. But yeah, I like this. This range feels fairly straightforward and comfortable. Let's take a quick look at our raising. Oh, we don't even have that much raising range. I like not raising on the flop. And I think that when it's like an ace and 2 low cards, it's going to be like a lot of the times not raising on the flop is going to seem like pretty reasonable because it's going to be very, unless you're playing a pre-flop strategy that's like really going to have a lot of those low suited connectors and suited gappers. It's going to be like hard to have like really the right types of hands. You could make an argument to like raising for protection with cards like maybe 10s and 9s and something like this, but that just feels like terrible like to do into aces. That just seems like a maniac move, which is really why like it's hard to find raises on these types of boards. Like when it's all low cards, you can raise with overs sometimes, right? And or even like top pair, top kicker type hands with like a flush draw or something like merge-ish, where you're going to be ahead most of the time, and then when you're behind, you have a lot of equity. Like it becomes like 7-5 deuce, and you have ace 7 of suited somehow. So yeah, this I like this just calling. I think that they should bet smaller on the flop, and that'll make it so you have to call wider, which makes defending on the turn harder. Our turn defense felt like really straightforward. We stopped slow playing our sets with the second flush draw coming in, which I think is good. We bluffed with some stuff that blocked the nuts, with the 5s and the 6s, which I think make good barrels even when the flush comes in, because they both have heart and a club in them. And so these are going to be like, you're just going to barrel on the next street. And then if the flush comes in, you're going to have flushes here and here, and those are going to be your value bets. So you're going to have 2 bluffs, right? And then you're going to have 2 value bets. And if these flushes miss, and then you're going to check call the like 4s and 3s or something like that. Or maybe you bet some of these for value, if you want. And then if the flush misses, then you bet the 3s and the 4s for value, and you bet these 2 as bluffs. And then you just check fold the other ones, which probably leaves you like, well, that definitely leaves you exploitable. So maybe what you should do is you should have like a check raising range on the river or something. I don't know. Don't quite like that. I guess balancing this river range when it misses is a little bit tougher, because when you hit one of the flushes, you can check call with some amount of the sets, or all the sets if you want, and fold the missed draws and bluff the fives and the sixes. But you when you miss, the question is or when you hit one of the draws, I think I said that's when you hit. When you miss one of the draws, well, let's see, you have 6 combinations of value, and so maybe you just bet your entire, well, you can't bet your entire range. I guess you could and be exploitable, and maybe you just like, because so if you're betting these for value when you miss the sets, and betting these as bluffs when you miss, then you'll just be kind of check folding everything else, right? I mean, they had to put in money out to get this opportunity to bluff there on the river, so maybe that's not the like worst, but okay. And maybe you could just like be bluffing too much. I don't know. The king 10 might be okay. Like, it might be good sometimes, and so you just check the king 10 and you check fold it, and then you also bluff with the jack 9, and then you're okay that they get a bluff opportunity on your king 10 that you're just super exploitable. Generally speaking, when you like check raise and then check the next street, like that range is super hard to protect anyways, so maybe you shouldn't be too worried about it. You just like always look super weak there, and maybe you can like check raise of like a 4 or something, or even check raise one of the 5s and the 6s when everything just misses, because you still block the nuts. And so maybe that's like a way to play it. Because I don't think you want to check raise these for yeah, okay. I've talked enough about that. And then you're calling with like mostly these aces type hands, which feels fairly good. The just aces and flush draws. We decided that this king queen business was probably wrong, and this should be the jack 9 suited, and then the 9-10 suited should be over here, and that should be like a change. But okay, defended 60%, and here we have a note, and then the river comes the 6 of clubs, and it's just very straightforward. We continue with all of our aces because that's like what we have left. Can make some argument for like using the king queen here somewhere. If you use the king queen, maybe you raise the jack 10 of clubs, and then you also raise the king queen, and you just like defend a little bit more of your range because you decide we have a lot of flushes, which we kind of do. Like close to a third of our range is flushes. We have 7 flushes, and then when we don't have a flush, another like half of our range either has a flush or blocks the nut flush. So some argument there. There's another argument too that we should not play this in flow, and we should have a leading range. This range is sufficiently small that maybe we could look through that. And so the question is what hands do we want to lead with? I think we want to lead with mostly our flushes that are not the nut flush. That way we get to kind of pick our price, and then also lead with some of our ace queen maybe. And then look to call our ace, check call our ace jack, and check raise. Yeah, so if we have a lead range, so there's our lead range, our bluff, and the question is, do we want to have a check raise range? I think we do. Check bluff, and then check call. So as you see, this like starts getting complicated, and having the numbers is like a little bit tough. But I think I like maybe leading with the ace 10 of clubs, because we do not block a lot of their stronger flushes. As far as our we have the best flush, but we do not block some of their stronger flushes because we do not have the king or queen or jack. If we had the ace-5 of clubs in our opening range and we got here with the ace-5 of clubs on the river, I like the ace-5 of clubs a lot here as the lead, one of like the leads to protect, and we're check raising the ace-jack of clubs. Okay. And then here in our bluff, I think I like putting the king queens here. And I messed up, and this should be hearts. Because we don't quite block the nuts, but we do have no showdown value. And so checking when they can check behind, when we have like the ace jack with the ace of clubs, feels a little bit better because we have the no showdown value. And then we're gonna want to add a few more combos of leads in order to make this balanced. So we're gonna want to add 3 more leads. Let's see. And the way we're playing this like lead range is we're gonna actually let's play it like this. Let's have our our king jack of clubs, because this is our weakest king of clubs, and then our weakest one, and then our 2 weakest ones actually. Queen and 10 of clubs. And so we'll lead for a little bit of a smaller size here with this range, and the idea, well actually if we're leading smaller we don't even need to have as many so we're leading a bit on the smaller side. Because we're leading smaller, we do not need as high a percentage of value bets, and so we are leading with our weakest flush as a way of kind of protecting it, but still trying to make sure we get value from it. So instead of having it as a check call, we're having it as a lead. That way we don't miss out on a bet. And then we're also doing our weakest, our ace that doesn't block some of the higher Broadway clubs. And then what we'll do is we will, if they raise here, we will fold the bluffs and I guess call with these 2, and then raise with the ace-10 of clubs. So maybe we'll have the queen-10 of clubs actually in here, and then we will could just have all of our queen there, yeah. And then maybe bet a little bit bigger. So here we're going to have all of our king of clubs, king queen of clubs, king jack of clubs, and our check raise, and now we need to find a couple of bluffs and then check calls. Let's see. So here now we're not having enough value hands in our raising range, but I think we'll just do ace of clubs, jack off, or jack of hearts, or sorry, jack of spades and diamonds. That way it's more likely that they're doing this with a broken draw. Could also just do all the ace jack and then call with everything else that we have above. Or just 2 fewer combos of ace jack. So I suppose we don't want to call with ace jack of hearts because we want them to have the ace jack of hearts. So we'll just minus that. because we want them to have the ace of hearts and the jack of hearts in their betting range more, and this blocks both of them, so we won't call with those. And so this is maybe how we would construct like a lead variation where we're defending, I think, one more combo. So instead we're defending 29 here. Or we're not even defending 29 because, let's see, we have to actually look at it differently. We are leading 6. So here. So now there are only 40 combos. And so you need to defend 24. Let's see, this is 1, 2, 3, 5. This is 25, so we're defending one more combo than necessary. But now we get, I think I like this better. It's obviously harder to make these ranges because you're trying to balance 5 different piles, right? Instead of just the, or even, it's technically like 6 piles if you consider the check fold. But this way, we get to have a nice bluff lead with these king-queen hands. These make the best bluffs, and we are just check folding all of our missed heart draws. And generally speaking, you kind of like want to bluff your weakest hands as a general heuristic, all other things equal, but all other things aren't equal because you want to have the busted like flush draws in your opponent's range. And so when we have like the king jack of hearts, they can't have a king of hearts or a jack of hearts, and so it's less likely that they've been bluffing this whole way because they don't have some of the hands you could be bluffing with. And so this is why we want to do it less with the hearts, and these king-queen hands have the fewest hearts out of our remaining hands that aren't like ace-jack off type hands or ace-queen off, which we're just check calling because they have showdown value. It's like it's all missed flush draws or all missed heart draws here except for the mixed draws. And so that's one of the reasons I kind of like these type of hands because they make constructing ranges way easier. But maybe that's just a bit of a crutch. Like I could buy that we don't want these and we want jack 9 here instead, 10-9 here instead, and then we just have to have a leading range that includes probably the 10-9 of hearts and then probably the jack 9 of hearts and the jack 10 of hearts as our lead. But so this is maybe what a leading range would look like here. I tried to lead with the weakest flushes, one of the strongest flushes to try and protect the range a little bit. That doesn't block. That blocks as few of the strong flushes as possible. If ace 5 suited was in the range, I would like this even more. Even the leading idea I would like a lot more because it makes balancing it easier. And the idea behind leading is that we are trying to make sure that we get a bit of a cheaper price on our weaker flushes. That way we don't have to just check call our flushes, which doesn't feel too good. Because they can just check back, and they will check back with like a lot of aces, right? And so like that doesn't feel good, so we're just trying to get a little bit of money, and then also trying to get some folds, have our range be balanced, and then we are check raising our strongest flushes, and check bluffing with turning ace-jack into a bluff when we do not have the jack of hearts, because we want them to have the jack of hearts. When we have the ace clubs. And yeah, so I think this was productive. We talked a lot about, at the start we talked a lot about like why you want to bluff or why you want to bet kind of at the beginning, and so maybe going back over some of this now will help. If you don't want to go back over it, I'm just going to like quickly review it. So like why you bet on the flop or why you bet in general is for value, because you want to get more money. As a bluff, because they have a better hand and you want them to fold and you think they'll fold, or as protection. What you generally want protection from is overs, straights, and flushes. At least on the flop, like once the flushes are in, then you want protection from the board pairing, which is a much less common occurrence than like a flush card coming in, right? It's more common as the streets go on, but you get what I'm saying. And then in terms of sizing, when you bet small, it keeps your range more condensed. As you bet bigger and bigger and bigger, your range gets more polarized, so that's something to keep in mind. And then going back to bluffs a little bit, when you bet and you're trying to fold your opponent's hand, you're going to have more hands that you want to bet, like to fold your opponent's good hands, than you can do in a balanced way, so that because of that, when you bluff, you want to bluff primarily with hands that can improve and not just nothing burger hands, unless it's like a really good spot and you're trying to exploit them. So that was a little bit of a quick review. If you have any specific hands you want to go over, feel free to put them in the comments. Put them in terms of position, who is playing who. If you want to, if you think stack size is important, put stack sizes in as well. And then don't put what you had, just put, if you know what your opening ranges are, put your opening range, but do not put the hands that you actually had, because that's not the type of analysis we are conducting. And I think it would be more insightful to maybe see, if I don't know what you're exactly playing, because stuff might get put into boxes that you thought were maybe not how you would have played it or something like this. Because often you can justify playing things both ways. Like, I think on the turn, if you are the cutoff, that either betting ace-jack of clubs or checking ace-jack of clubs makes sense. And the reason you check it is so you're protecting your checking range by having some combos of the nut flush draw in it. And then you are also kind of shutting down a little bit in terms of, you know, your opponent can have ace-queen, and so you don't want to bet with a hand that's not beating their calling range when you're betting it for value. And so it can kind of play better as a check, and it will also give you a good hand on the river. When everything misses, you get to bet it for value again. And so it just makes you a little bit trickier of a player. You want to check some of your ace-jack, and the question is, which ones do you want to check? And in general, you want to check some of them that are less susceptible to being drawn out on, and so ace-jack of clubs is less susceptible to being drawn out on. And then also, it allows you to have nut flush in your checking range. And so I like, generally speaking, betting the stronger, like ace-queen suited, because you also want, you definitely want the nut flush in your betting range, but just kind of splitting those aces around a bit. Like on the flop, I liked checking back ace-4 of clubs, for example. Anyways, this video's gone on long enough. Hopefully that was insightful. If you have comments, suggestions, all that stuff, feel free to put it in the comments. If you liked it, like the video, feel free to subscribe, all that fun YouTube algorithm stuff, and have a good day.